Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to droidcon and welcome to my talk. My name is Teresa Wu. I work for JP Morgan as a software engineer, and I'm also a Flutter GDE. And today I'm going to talk to you about building Flutter on desktop. So I don't know if any of you have tried building a desktop application before? No? Yes? Yes? Awesome. So yeah, you might hear me talk about the good side of it and then maybe sharing some thoughts of it. So let's begin. By the way, if you have any question, right, do ask or stop me at any time you wish. I'm hoping this to be be more interactive. Right. So I can't leave this area. What the journey that you will be in the next 40 minutes, I will talk about how you set up the environment of the desktop application in three environment, Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. And in a build section, I will focus a bit more on the navigation and how you use keyboard shortcuts. That's one of the things that if you came from mobile and web background, you probably don't have, or maybe it's one of the areas we kind of concentrate differently comparing to desktop application. And I'll give you some demo and case studies of why we want to build a desktop application. And in the end, we will try to publish it in those various platforms. So giving you a bit of background of Flutter and the desktop app, I'm not going to read through it line by line. You can feel free to read them. So iOS was launched in 2007, and a year later, any of you can tell me which one is launched? Yay, Android. Yeah. And then following that, you have PhoneGap and Xamarin, and also React Native was launched in 2015, which is kind of one of the very big competitor with Flutter right now. I'm not saying competitor, but you have different choices with when you build a cross-platform use cross-platform framework for your application. Maybe you think about React Native or Flutter, maybe Kotlin multi-platform as well. And after React Native was launched, 3 years later, guess which framework is launched? Yay! Thank you. So Flutter was launched in 2018, and then we have Kotlin multi-platform, which I think, if I'm not wrong, it was in beta 2-3 days ago. It was announced it's going to be in beta now. We wait patiently for it to release, hopefully, and we can give it a try. Okay, now before we go into the actual coding, there's some some preparation we need to do. So let's imagine so on my Mac machine, I want to make sure I have the correct version, correct device I need. That's why I go to check Flutter devices. And you can also run Flutter Doctor as well. So make sure you are in the right environment. You have to go with Flutter version 3 and above, or there's different version. I think use that support desktop, but visually try with version 3. So, right. Imagine that you have an already established Flutter project that you're now creating this from beginning. The way that you want to configure your project from mobile or from web to desktop is really, really simple. You navigate to your existing Flutter project, and that's the command you need, literally that. Right? You run the command in your terminal and hit enter, and you will see the magic of that. You have this folder that will be created for you in your project. So this is how you enable Mac OS desktop environment in your existing project. Now, when you see the green star, that means it's a question for you. Let's say, right, enable Mac OS desktop, that's the command, right? Imagine that we want to do the Linux. What was the magic word in the middle? You got it. Right. So if you run similar command again, you will guarantee to have this folder Linux, right, enabling you have Linux desktop environment in your existing project. This is not you building from scratch, right? If you build it from scratch, the command is slightly different, but I think it's great instead of saying config. But again, it's same. Now, Windows. Sorry, did I say Windows? Right. How do you guys enable Windows? Also, don't forget that you need to run the Flutter create command in the end to actually create the project. So right, so it's super simple. You just run those. Yes.
If you want to, I can do this in a one-line if you Flutter create dot and then / platforms and then just write dot platforms.
That was my question as well. But anyway, you got it. 10 points, no, 10 plus points for you. So if you don't want to add desktop support in the existing project, you can also do the create as well. Yeah, that's much easier. So with all these commands, right, you have now, let's say, 3 environments in your project. What's going to be next, right? That's not the end of it, it's just beginning. A little bit comparison as usual. So again, there are different ways you can use to create desktop application, right? Yeah, and I'm using React Native now because it's kind of in a very widespread framework. So here, when you choose mobile cross-platform frameworks, you probably hear a lot about the comparison between Flutter and React Native. Now, when it comes to web, we did, myself, right? None of this is related to my work. It's all my personal project, so I have to make this declaration in the beginning. So we tried a bit of using React Native for web. It works. There's still some gotcha areas, but it works. Now, when it comes to desktop applications, React Native, at the moment, for what I'm aware of, it doesn't support desktop within its own framework itself. It does work with third-party providers, like, for example, Windows provide a library for React Native to be the bridge that you can code Windows desktop with React Native. But right now, for Flutter, it's one of the products I know in the market that supports all those platforms naturally within its framework as a first-class citizen. And yeah, so also React Native doesn't support Linux just yet on desktop. So I'm sorry for this, and I have a very simple application, nothing fancy. We load a web page, which is a movie list. So this is something I have as my mobile application, right? So one of the things I found during my own experience is that if you want to convert your existing mobile or web application to desktop, using Flutter is probably one of the recommendation I would suggest. It's quite easy. You just have to convert it and use the current existing Flutter function you have. You might have to create some bridge, like local storage, think about notification. But all this, right, if you don't find the libraries in Flutter at the moment, you can always go back to native functions and code them and build a bridge. But you might want to think about if you want to do a desktop-first application using cross-platform framework as of today. It depends on how mature and how fancy your project is. But to do a POC, I think that's for what we have as today for Flutter is good enough. So there are few so if you come from mobile dev background, you might not find those gotcha moments, especially if you are into iOS already. If not, here are a few things you need to remember, right? Always have the Mac OS configuration set up ready. Otherwise, when you run when you create the configuration of Flutter for the Mac OS and when you run it, you will hit a lot of errors. Just make sure you download every dependencies and pod in your machine. So once you have everything else here, and you run Flutter on the Mac OS, you should probably have your app loaded naturally on your computer. And move on to Linux. Then I found it's a bit funny because first of all, I'm not an expert desktop engineer. So the first thing I did, of course, right, to set up my Linux computer, have the environment, and then run Flutter Doctor. Then I run into lots of red arrows. It was like, what did I do wrong? Then look into each of them. You do need every single list in that Flutter Doctor check. So just be a bit patient, same as how we did for using Flutter in the very first time. We need to install everything. And yeah, literally probably be more than what I listed here, but literally you need to install everything, and eventually you will have the Linux, at least, right? If you're running Linux right now, you will see the Linux green box ticked on the side of it. That means you're ready. So once you have that, do the same as what you did for the Mac OS environment. Just run Linux, simple. Right? That's a command you need. That's everything you need. And you should see the Linux application running in the Linux environment. And sorry, I hacked a bit here. For Windows, I just don't have enough time to set up everything on Windows again. But I did a simple application in Windows. So that is how you do Windows as well, following the steps. So in terms of how you configure the project, how you convert it, how you build it on a simple application, or you converting your project in desktop, I would say the steps are pretty easy-ish. I didn't find much, like a lot of difficult situations where I just wanted to give up. But the moment comes when you want to build a production-ready enterprise-level project, because it's not just, it probably don't stop at where you want to load a web page or just loading some data from API. You need to think about design system, right? Think about navigation. And one of the things that you probably will find a bit different when you build desktop app is the keyboard. Sorry, when I say try it, I don't mean try the application, but you can try it. This will lead you to the physical keyboard page where you can actually see how the keyboard works in the Colab. So there's actually libraries that you can use to help you handle the physical keyboard. And one thing I found is that as a mobile developer, as a web front-end engineer, we deal with keyboards differently. We use taps, touches, or even gestures most of the time. But now moving to desktop application, you have to think about the actual physical keyboard, and they are different on different environment. So the first option for you is to use a physical keyboard key, where you can basically search for the key you need and add functions to it. But this is a bit of a manual, right? Manual-ish. One of the things you can do is treat the keyboard and navigation as similar as how you do design system. So right now in a Flutter project, we have one design system that wraps iOS, Android, or web underneath the hood. So we check environment and we load the design system for the environment that we are running with. We can do similar things with keyboard as well. Again, moving on to the shortcuts, it will be probably even trickier because you want to group few of the keys underneath one callback. So here's how you can do keyboards. You can even handle just one key, want to handle a group of key shortcuts. So yeah, if you are thinking of building a desktop application using cross-platform framework like Flutter, this is one of the areas I would suggest you thinking about how you design it properly. Right, so with building things with Flutter and in desktop, here are some of my thoughts. Yes?
Question about shortcuts.
Yeah.
Does the framework natively handle some shortcuts, common shortcuts like Command C, Command B? You need to implement them yourself, but the framework implements it, right?
Right. So that's the framework you can find in Flutter. So you can use the framework to handle different type of keys. But imagine that moving on to the shortcuts. Sorry, I wasn't very clear on this one. Imagine the shortcuts, right? When you create a shortcuts, like a Control-C, Control-Command, for example, they have different key on Windows and different key on Mac. But the function you want to provide for your application is the same, but the keys are different. So you probably will end up having 90 lines of code for a function if you don't design them beforehand. Or you can provide a universal design for the keyboard shortcuts, like how we do design system, using the same logic, applying that to handle the keyboards. So you do a bit of like function programming, but you ignore the keys, what the key you use when you call the function. I don't know if I could expand it properly.
I just wanted to be clear if Flutter natively handles common shortcuts.
Yes. Yeah, those are the functions that you can find in Flutter. It does provides all the functions you need, but you might have to create either 3 types of shortcuts or 1. So some of the thoughts in building Flutter desktop application that there's no, like for example, right, when we think about IDE, and maybe we can have more of online IDE support, and finding emulator for the project is a bit tricky because when we build a mobile application or web, there's web we can use locally, and there's emulator we can use. So I can use a Mac machine running Android and iOS app, or using Windows or Linux. What happens when you build a desktop application? There's no emulator you can use. So if you are engineer who using Flutter in your team, coding for 3 platforms, you need 3 computers. Or you go with a VM, but you probably don't want to use a VM for your day-to-day job. So having good support this testing environment emulator for desktop is kind of, for me, it's quite important. Yeah, or if not, so for me, I have to create a few VMs in a GCP to try this sample app. Or I hope, right, if they don't go down the route of creating emulator for us when we build the Flutter desktop application, maybe create some like pre-made Flutter VM in a GCP family that you can just go down and load it. And you don't have to install everything from scratch. Again, if I can make a wish, I hope they don't charge me for it as well. So we can have like a dev environment, Flutter VM in a GCP family. Yeah, add to app function as well. So we have this function in mobile already. Maybe we can create more bridge or add to app in a desktop environment, and maybe think about the universal design system as well. So right now the design system for different desktop application are a bit different, similar as how we handle iOS and Android. So now we imagine we talk about the build navigation on a very highly overview. My next part is I'm going to talk about build and distribution. Before we go into that, because it's going to be a heavy topic again, let's think about why do we need desktop application. Do you have any other thoughts of why we need it apart from those? Like you can access them offline. It's safer to store your data. Maybe it's better performance, and it's native. Yes?
Having bigger screens.
Yes. Thank you. Right. So you do have lots of advantages that you need desktop application, right? Let's think about what is your favorite desktop application. That's something you use every day. I know you're going to tell me Slack, but something that you don't want to use a web app, but use desktop app. Yes, IDE, right? There's online IDE solution, but you probably want to use a desktop, and you don't want to use a mobile version of the IDE for sure. Yeah? So here are some of my findings, which when I look at my computer, those are the apps I definitely go with desktop application instead of mobile. And actually, sorry, taking that back, email, I have that on my mobile, and the Slack, but I don't want to use the web version of it. Email, Spotify, anyone with me for Spotify? No? Yeah, thank you. So now you're my friend. IDE, I think we're all great. IDE, right? Slack, Zoom, right? Video, Zoom, maybe, yeah. Yeah, I like to have it on all the time. So yeah, but yeah, I know. Right. Anything else that you can think of that you use desktop? Maybe games. Okay, I'll put that under that. That's like a group, but yeah, games, right? So those are the probably very popular case studies you can find on desktop application. And the other, they exist. They're very popular. Although we talk about the mobile a lot and the web nowadays, desktop in our community is not something that we mention day to day. But here, from this example, you see why we're actually building it, right? And imagine that you can build all these apps with one language, and instead of having three or four. So let's move on to the next part, which is to distribute. Again, this is one of my favorite subject, release and distribute. So if you want to handle distribution on Mac OS, if you come back again from iOS background or mobile background, you might find this process a bit familiar. You build Mac OS with the Flutter command, and you probably have this account already. If not, you need to have this bundle ID, and you need to connect, register the app on the App Store Connect, and following the usual process of how you upload your mobile application. They are very similar-ish, but this time you release a desktop app. There's no much surprising there. So moving on to Linux. So any of you distributed a Linux app before? No? Okay. So this what I found is quite interesting because Linux is a different word. If you think about Linux, it's just a name, but underneath Linux, there are different flavor. There are Debian, there's sorry? Yeah, and Ubuntu, right? So they're actually different, another branch of cross-platform already on its own. But luckily, to distribute things in Linux, you have this store called Snapcraft. Again, you need to create an account and register yourself as a developer, and then following all these nice commands, and eventually you will have your app released in a Linux store. And this one is accessible for different flavors of Linux you use. With Windows, you have two options. Windows in this way for the distribution is a bit more like Android in a way that you can either build your app and distribute it anywhere, the one in the green box. So you can either distribute it on your website by email. Please don't do that, because Majid just talked about security. So he's going to not be happy with me, but you could do that as one option. Or you can go with the recommended way to use this MSIX package. There might be a nicer way to call it, but MSIX is the one you need. You build it with this package and to make sure this is secure, and then you can distribute this in the Microsoft store instead. So following the secure process. And also you have a certificate as well. But this one is very manual-ish. So you have to do this manually and imagine how often you want to release your application. If it's bi-weekly or bi-monthly, you have to go through this again and again. So another solution that you can think of is CI/CD. And sorry, I don't work for any of those companies. I don't get commission from them. So I just put their name here because they're very popular. And the one in the middle is Upcircle, because they don't have a name in the logo. Everything else you can read, right? They have a nice letter in the logo. So CI stands for continuous integration, whereas CD stands for continuous deployment. And so those are the platform I found as today that support distribute Flutter desktop applications. I did try a bit using Bitrise. Again, I don't get commission from Bitrise. They give me a very nice pin and the stickers in the graph bar, but I don't work for them. I tried Bitrise in my coding example because I used Bitrise before and I'm kind of familiar with the UI interface. So for this demo purpose, I use Bitrise. And you have a free account where you have 500 credits, I think. That means you can actually try it a bit for your personal project. And the image you can see is how you can set up on Bitrise. So you create a project first. You connect this project with your Git Bitbucket or GitHub or anything that you have your credential. And then you can land on this workflow page where you can add things to it. The reason I'm saying that for my previous slides, you have different platform and they support Flutter desktop is because they do have few building functions already you can just use. You don't have to build everything yourself. Or you can use the script, as you can see that in a little icon says script. You can create your own script, or you can just grab the existing functions like the archive for Mac and Flutter install and just do the final push to the store. So yeah, the step is just that you create the project on Bitrise, you connect, and you make the initial build. You configure the desktop build and the deploy environment. And you can add your scripts or building steps, and you're ready to go. So just click a button, and you will see the app build and upload to App Store, which is super easy. So if you are building, if you are doing a sample project yourself, you don't have to go down this automation route, right? Just do a little try yourself. But as for enterprise level project, I would definitely recommend having everything underneath one hood using CI/CD instead. So, right, we come to the end already. Of course, right, we wouldn't finish this Flutter topic without trying the same app on our very familiar platforms. So again, with the same code that you see them running in Windows, in Mac OS, and in Linux environment. You don't have to change a thing. With Flutter, the magic is you can run them on web, iOS, and Android as well, and the UI remains the same. Right, so thank you. Do you have any questions? Thank you. Yeah.
Have you created any more complex applications?
In the desktop application?
Yeah.
I would say no, because this is actually my very first time trial this desktop application. But if you want to give it a try, I think you might find few things that you don't have support at the moment with the Flutter family for desktop, like storage. Navigation is going to be a bit of thing that you have to try yourself. There's not much example as yet, but you can be the first one providing those examples or providing a nice library for it. Design system, notification, like lots of things. Like right now, it's in the beginning, and if you want to even build this with game, it's going to be even nice. I like to hear talk about it. Right.
How easy is it to create a custom design if you have a custom? So if you don't want it to look exactly like the one,
How easy it is, or how hard it is. I would say, because imagine that, because I've been coding for mobile for many years, right? In the very beginning, when we do mobile application, there's no mentioning about design system. We have to just handle different variants of Android phones ourselves, right? This will be another era of trying things on desktop because the screen is different, the platform is different, and you might actually load this on TV as well, right, eventually. So I wouldn't say it's hard because you do have example of how you code cross-platform on mobile and the web already. If the image and the resolution works for web, it should be fine for desktop. But the only thing you need to watch out is the different environment and how they call them differently on different platforms. Thank you.